In our previous lesson, we saw that to form le passé composé, we needed the verb avoir in the present tense. Then we needed to add a past participle, which is the past form of the verb. And in French, it ends in et for ER verbs, I for IR verbs, and U for RE verbs. What is different about this other type of verbs is the fact that instead of using avoir as the auxiliary verb, they use the verb être, to be. Notice that the regular past participle endings are the same. The difference is that we use a different auxiliary. So let's see which these verbs are. Aller, venir, and also revenir. Partir, arriver. Entrer, sortir. Monter, descendre. Naître, mourir. Rester. Be careful with this one, it doesn't mean to rest, it means to stay. Devenir. Tomber. Passé. Here the verb passé takes the auxiliary être because it means to pass through. It has other meanings and sometimes you will find that its passé composé uses the verb avoir. So be careful with the meaning of this one. Revenir, rentrer, retourner. You must have noticed that we've got this verb revenir again. That means to return, but I wanted to show you that there are in fact 3 ways to say to return in French. Mrs. Van der Tramp is in fact an acronym to help remember the être verbs in the passé composé. So the first letter of each of these verbs has been put in an order that gives you the name of Mrs. Van der Tramp. Clever, isn't it? Next, let's have a look at the past participles. Most of them work like past participles used with avoir verb, exactly the same. But let's have a look at them a bit closer. We've got monter, rester, sorti. So far, so good. But then we've got venu. Venu should really end with I, veni, but it doesn't. It's venu, the past participle, therefore it's irregular. Then we've got aller and naître. Naître becomes né, therefore is massively irregular. Descendu, entrer, rentrer, tomber, retourner, arriver, and one that's very irregular, mort. Then we've got parti and passé. Let's not forget the verbs derived from the verb venir. Got revenir and devenir, that will work exactly the same as venir. So let's see how we use those être verbs in the passé composé. Now there is a good news and there is a bad news. So let's have a look at an example. So the verb aller, to go. If I want to use it in the passé composé, I will need first the auxiliary verb être, and then I need a past participle, just like with avoir verbs. Now the bad news is that the past participle with être verbs agrees with the subject. This means that, for example, if we look at je suis allé, if it's a man or a boy talking, we leave it as it is, but if it's a woman or a girl talking, we need to add an extra E. The same as tu es allé. Il est allé will stay the same because we are certain that the subject is a masculine singular subject, but elle est allée will need systematically an extra E. On est allé can stay like this if it's an impersonal subject, meaning one went. But if we mean that on equals we might have to add an extra S or an extra E, depending on the masculine or the feminine plural. The same as nous sommes allés, and the same as vous êtes allés. Ils sont allés will just have an S, and elles sont allées will have ES. Let's have a look at some examples. If Paul is talking, he will say je suis allé, no extra letter. If Sonia is talking, she will say je suis allée with an extra E. Ma sœur est allée à Paris, my sister went to Paris, will have an extra E. And mes frères sont allés à Paris will have an extra S. Now for the good news, when you are speaking, there's no difference in the pronunciation because the added letters are silent. You just have to remember the agreement, which means adding the extra letters, when you are writing. To summarize, in the singular, for masculine verbs we add nothing. For feminine verbs we add an extra E. On is a bit different because it is the third person, is considered as the third person, but it can sometimes mean we, so we might have nothing in the masculine or an extra S, and same with the feminine, we've got ES if we mean we went and it's feminine subjects. In the plural, for the masculine we add an S, and in the feminine form we add ES. Let's practice. In the top left corner you have the verbs that take être in the passé composé. I also highlighted the irregular past participles. You have a reminder about the regular past participles in the passé composé, and you also have in yellow the verb être. In the blue box are some sentences in English. What you have to do is to find the correct form of the verb in the passé composé in French. You may want to pause the video to allow yourself some time to write the answers and maybe check at the end, or you might want to do the activity with me as I go along. So, c'est parti, let's go. Numéro 1, the tree died. Let's be careful, in French we know that we're going to need two parts as opposed to English. So the tree is a masculine word, l'arbre, so it can be considered as he. So the correct form of the verb être is going to be est, E-S-T. And then to die is mourir, and the past participle is irregular, it's mort. Therefore, the tree died is l'arbre est mort. Numéro 2. My aunt came yesterday. Ma tante est venue hier. Extra E because of course ma tante is feminine. Numéro 3. He went through the window. Il est passé par la fenêtre. She became a teacher. Elle est devenue professeure. My parents were born in France. Mes parents sont nés en France, with an extra S, because my parents is of course plural. Lucy and Sarah fell in the river. Lucie et Sarah sont tombées dans la rivière. Extra E because it's feminine, extra S because it's plural. Numéro 7. I arrived at 7 o'clock. Je suis arrivé à 7 heures, with the option of adding an extra E if the subject is feminine. The boys went out last night. Les garçons sont sortis hier soir, with an extra S because of course les garçons is plural. I did not stay at home. Je ne suis pas resté à la maison. Extra possible E if the subject is feminine. Numéro 10. He's never been to France. Il n'est jamais allé en France. So I wanted to do the last two to show you that as for verbs avoir, the ne goes before the auxiliary and the pas goes after the auxiliary. This is why for number 9 we have je ne suis pas resté, and for number 10 il n'est jamais allé en France. Félicitations, you've completed lesson 3. As usual, I'll leave a little bit of homework for you. But for now, all I have to say is au revoir et à bientôt for lesson number 4.